Hello. So this next one, I think is probably. Well, let me go ahead. Anybody ever heard of and/or drank Bully Hill? Fantastic. All right. This is a completely out of this world, very different thing than what you're probably used to. Like I said, this is the only American wine that we're doing, and it's from Finger Lakes, so it's from New York, which obviously I don't think most of us think of New York as a place where wine comes from. But they do make wine up there. So I brought this for several different reasons. One is everybody who was at my last wine tasting, the Thanksgiving wine tasting, we got into a very long conversation about why our East Coast wines frowned upon, or whatever the phrases that we talked about. We had a long in-depth conversation about it, but the two people who are arguing with me the most aren't here, so that's failed on that part. But this is interesting for a couple different reasons, so I really want to take a second to talk about it. First of all, I had no idea what this was. There's one little wine shop in North Augusta that flies through this stuff. It's the only reason I've ever even heard of it. It's one of those things in the portfolio nobody ever says, can you bring out a set of your New York wines for me to taste today? So I never grabbed it or knew about it. But historically, what it is if you've ever heard of the Taylor Winery, the Taylor Winery is also out of New York. And the Taylor Winery started with a guy named Walter Taylor, and that was kind of the grandfather of the guy who made this wine popular. But it was in the very spot where Bully Hill is today, and at some point the Taylor Winery became very popular and had to start mass producing wines, and so they had to get bigger property to go to. So they left this area and moved somewhere else in New York still to produce all of their wines. What happened was Walter, the grandson and the father, so Walter Sr., there's a million Walters here. Walter Sr. Taylor was the one who started the actual Taylor Winery. He was the co-founder. And then his son and his son's son were the two guys who really made Bully Hill happen. And this was after his father had passed away. And what happened was, at this time, there were people doing a lot of not reputable practices when it comes to the world of wine, which means putting all sorts of chemicals in there, and you don't have to mention anything about them on the label. And kind of going in that direction as far as getting big tanks of vats of wine from California shipped to you and putting New York on the label, but none of the wine came from New York, which the youngest Walter Taylor here found that to be absolutely a horrible thing, and he's like, we want to keep it true to what we're doing here, which is a very, very neat story to me. What happens is he starts taking on a couple of the other wineries in the area and making some very, very rude comments about this, and he's very, very controversial. You can read some of the stuff that he wrote at some point if you're interested.
Very New York.
He got fired from Taylor for that, and that's when he went to make Bully Hill, so that's what happened there. And he kept doing his rambunctious, controversial talk about it until a big company named Coca-Cola bought Taylor. And when Coca-Cola bought Taylor, obviously they had some lawyer bucks behind them and had an injunction against Mr. Taylor. And what happened, there was 5 or 6 things that happened involved with this injunction, but there were things like you cannot say that you learned your winemaking skills from anybody at Taylor, even though his last name's Taylor and his grandfather's one who made the wine there. You can't say that the property where Bully Hill's made has anything to do with Taylor, even though that's the original Taylor property. All these things. And the last thing is you can't use your name, Taylor, on any of your wine labels, where he used to have a signature of Taylor on the front of his wine label. He can't have that. And they had to go a step further, and they had to turn in all of their wine labels that they had printed and give them over to the Taylor Wine Company to burn them or to destroy them. And so apparently what happened was he went to turn it all in, and he had his big tractor, and he was taking, and there was Taylor cars behind him, and everybody's cheering, Taylor, Taylor, what does that mean? Nothing. And they have this big chant going and all that stuff. But that he lost a lot of faith in himself. Like everybody's like, oh, you beat them, and no, we didn't, And so he apparently disappeared for several days, and they finally found him out in the barn. And they were like, what's going on with him? And he goes, I got it. I finally got it. They didn't get my goat. And they're like, what are you talking about? He goes, that's what I'm going to do. They got my name. They got my family. They got our tradition. They did not get my goat. And so all of his wines have something to do with goats on them. Love my goat. So this is the goat white wine, which is the very first one he made. So that is the goat story. So if you want to give this to some of your fun friends and tell them the goat story, you can. But there's one other interesting thing about this wine. Don't worry, I got it really cold, so it's warming up, so you'll all enjoy it. But one other interesting thing about this wine is it is made from non-vinifera grapes. So Vitis vinifera, that is Cabernet, Chardonnay, Merlot, every French varietal you can think of is all the same species. There are a couple of other grapes that are off of either American grape stock or kind of hybrid grapes, and that's what these are. So these are hybrid grapes between vinifera and other species of grapes. So completely different than anything else, and they mostly grow in America somewhere. There's a little bit grown in France, but the two grapes we have in here they're called Vidal Blanc and Saval Blanc, and so they're just very different. The other reason I brought this is because we want to make sure we had a little sweet wine. And the back of this wine, they have their little dry to sweet scale, and it's like right in the center. That's not what this is. This is sweet wine.
Oh.
So if you want some sweet wine, here it is. But Vidal Blanc, again, these are hybrid grapes that we made up. They're not naturally occurring grapes. And you do that for a couple of different reasons, but the main one that these grapes were made up is because the climate in New York is so darn cold that you wouldn't be able to grow a lot of different grapes, so they had to have but we do this for all sorts of reasons. Like one of them is phylloxera is a louse that kills. I mean, it destroyed like all of France's wine at some point. But if you put it on American rootstock, Americans are strong, so it doesn't hurt us. And so when you do hybrid of that, the same kind of qualities go. So that's what they're going for. But anyways, what you end up with is a really fun labeled white. It's like I said, it's a little sweet wine. So, but it's delicious and different, and I hope you enjoy it. And it's coming around right now. So.